As more people join, I need my glasses. The boxes get smaller.
Yes, they'll get smaller. Yay. I think, Louis, you have to change your background screen to a sea urchin now after that conversation.
Yeah, I didn't have one to quick enough to put there. So next meeting, I'll definitely put one up.
I have a seaweed background somewhere. So I don't wait too long, but I do wait long enough with the hopes that we'll get more people on. But like I said, I've got 80 students in both my classes and they're all over the place and they definitely watch the videos. So that's good. Yes, I'm sorry about the lighting for me. It is it's just weird. It's just the sun turned, it's behind me, so I'm not used to that. Trying to think, maybe I could. That might help. Maybe. I lean forward. Well, why don't we get going and people will join us as they join us. I don't want to take the people's time that came here, arrived on time. So we're going to start, I'm going to introduce both Yvonne, who is our field station director in Nantucket. I don't know if any of you know, but we actually have a field station, we meaning UMass Boston, in Nantucket. And Yvonne runs that. And she's going to just tell you a little bit about it. And then Tara Riley is the head of that. Tara, what's your, is the town biologist, but she also runs the hatchery in Nantucket. And pretty much if there's anything to do with aquaculture in Nantucket, you're going to find Tara somewhere in that trajectory. So they're both with us today. I'm going to start with Yvonne and have her introduce herself and the field station briefly. And then we'll just go right to Tara. And I do have a video that I'm responsible for showing. So we'll stream that when Tara tells me to. Okay.
Hi, everyone. So as Jen told you, my name is Yvonne Valancourt, and I'm the director at the Nantucket Field Station. We are a UMass Boston facility managed by the School for the Environment. And I live down here year round. We have we're open year round, and we have a dormitory. It currently is at 50% still. You know, our occupancy is limited still a bit by COVID, but normally we can put up 14 people. And people get approved to come down and use the station, whether it's the dorm or the laboratory, by contacting me. And people come and use it for a variety of reasons. We run courses, but people come and do research. And sometimes they come down to collaborate with other people like Tara or the hatchery. We sit on over 100 acres of conservation land, and we're right on the harbor. We do not have a dock, and which is why it's so great that we have this local town-run hatchery that Tara is the director of, and we work on projects together. So that is a resource that we're really thrilled to have on the island. Our laboratory provides a teaching space as well as research space and equipment. And I'd be happy to talk to anyone about that. Like I said, we're open year round, and I'm here year round. We are on campus in Boston. I know you guys are remote, so I don't know how many of you are physically there, but in this world of hybrid interactions, whenever I do an event to raise awareness or to talk about things the station's doing or involved in, I have been running hybrid versions of that at the same time. So I will let Jen know that, and you could be tuning into some of those to learn more about the opportunities on the island. For example, every 2 years we have a conference here. So the field station is a happy and long-term member of this entity called the Nantucket Biodiversity Initiative. And we give out small grants. We also run a conference every 2 years. And that conference is occurring the first week of November this year. So if you are interested, I can also provide that website to Jen. You may want to check it out. It's not aquaculture per se, but it is heavily infused with things that live in the water and can affect aquaculture. For instance, somebody who came this spring and used the station had one of those grants. He was from upstate New York and was studying polychaetes that are parasitic on scallops. And so he was working with Tara over at the hatchery and stayed here at the station, worked in the lab for about a week, and was able to get a lot done. So that's just an example. I'd be happy to talk more at length about using the station. We do have a moderate fee associated with overnights or with using the lab. But again, reach out and contact me. We have a website. That's umb.edu/Nantucket. And my email is there if you want to contact me directly, and you can take a look at our facilities. And as I said, in the summer, we run classes, we host workshops, and year round, we support researchers and sometimes also run a semester-long set of courses. So I will stop talking because I know you're here to listen to Tara, but I'd be happy to talk to anyone if you're interested about the station. And the backdrop behind me is our beach that's down not very far from where I'm sitting right now. So thank you for your time, and you can take it over to Jen or Tara.
Great, Tara, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself briefly, and then whenever you want me to show the video, hopefully it'll work fine if I just share my screen. So we'll see.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. My name is Tara Riley. I am the town biologist for Nantucket. A lot of people refer to me as a shellfish biologist because I do specialize in shellfish. But when I first came here, I was dealing with a little bit of everything. So I was handling marine mammal strandings, water quality, all kinds of stuff. And it's just fresh in my mind because I'm redoing my job description right now. And I'm like, wow, I don't do any of that stuff anymore, which is sad, but also good because I have some other exciting things that I'm working on. But I came to Nantucket in 2009. My background is in commercial shellfish production. I went to graduate school for fisheries in Auburn, Alabama. And I was concentrating on fish production, actually, freshwater fish. Catfish are king down there. And I basically, my first job out of grad school, I was raising flounder and hybrid striped bass, and I really loved that. But I wanted to focus on something a little bit more sustainable. So I migrated over to the marine world and shellfish and ended up working on a private clam farm in Virginia for 7 years. And that's really where I developed my experience with the hatchery and spawning and production and that sort of thing. So that kind of led me to my career here on Nantucket. And this job has been really exciting because when I came here, it was kind of like a blank slate. The town had this really great boathouse that was owned by the Coast Guard right on Brant Point, which is right at the entrance to our harbor. And it was being used for storage and basically like a dive locker. So when I saw that, I was pretty excited because it was an excellent spot for a hatchery with the water, you know, coming in with each tidal cycle, being real close to the jetties. And, you know, my job is to restore the commercial and recreational bay scallop fishery. It's very important historic and cultural part of Nantucket. And it's decreased a lot over the years due to a variety of pressures. And so I was able to start kind of a ghetto hatchery, a little makeshift hatchery on $10,000 and some trash cans. And we produced our first 5 million bay scallops in 2010. And that was pretty exciting. And so people started to get interested in what we were doing. And when we gave them a tour of the hatchery and they saw, you know, our tarps and our trash cans and stuff, they felt sorry for us. So they started giving us some more money. And in 2016, we were able to do a $2 million renovation of the facility. So what it is now is a state-of-the-art municipal shellfish hatchery. And it's kind of unique because not many municipalities have their own shellfish hatchery that is used for stock enhancement for the public. So we're really proud of the fact that we can provide this service, not only for our fishermen, but for tourists and our year-round residents to enjoy. So we raise bay scallops. Like I said, we also do oysters and we do quahogs. We've recently engaged in habitat studies and doing eelgrass transplants with other island organizations. We do all the water quality around the islands in both of our harbors and in the great ponds that we have. And as you know, all of this stuff is linked together in the ecosystem. And yeah, so my job as the town biologist is basically to act as a liaison between the town and the community and the fishermen, but also just, you know, to produce as many scallops and try to implement, you know, research and field work that will help enhance the bay scallop populations here on Nantucket. So I'm trying to think of what else I have. Our department started off with 2 people and now we're up to about 10 people total. We also developed an aquaculture program here on Nantucket. It was already in existence when I arrived in 2009, but I think there were 15 acres being actively farmed, and now we have about 100 acres that are approved for aquaculture here in our harbors. They're not all actively being farmed, but we went ahead and got some blanket approvals for some areas because it is such a lengthy process to get everything permitted. So most of the aquaculture that goes on here on the island is oyster aquaculture. I think there is some interest in going into some seaweed farming and diversifying, but a lot of our growers here have been scallopers in the past, and they're also trying to diversify and think of a sustainable way to make a living in case the fishery, doesn't continue to improve. So they're just looking for a steady way to make some income. So, so that's what's going on the island. Every year we're just producing our shellfish and doing surveys and trying ways to reinvigorate the fishery to keep everything going. So I do have a short video. I apologize, it's from 2018, but it does show our hatchery completely up and running. This time of year we're shut down, so it would be really hard to envision everything if I were to film it today. So everyone might look a little bit younger in the video, but feel free to show it, and then I'm happy to talk more in detail about anything that you guys might be interested in or answer any questions that you might have.
Can everyone see? Okay, thanks. Thumbs up works for me.
Today, you're here in the boathouse, and we're going to give you a quick tour and show you what's going on here in the world of shellfish. So our main job here is to help preserve and restore the bay scallop commercial fishery and the recreational fishery. We also do a lot of oyster stock enhancement, quahog enhancement, water quality, you name it. Anything that has to do with the harbor, we're involved in it. So come along and I'll give you a tour. Okay, so now you're standing in, this is our broodstock room. We have 12 tanks here, and this room holds our adult shellfish. So it's used to hold quahogs, oysters, and bay scallops. And what's unique about this room is that shellfish this time of year, it's March, are not used to spawning, and so they're kind of dormant right now. So this room kind of mimics spring conditions on Nantucket. And so we have our lights on a photo period. So they're on for 16 hours a day, off for 8 hours. Also, the water temperature here is warmer than it is in the harbor right now. So these quahogs are at 68 degrees. And we're also feeding them algae, which is over here in these tubes called cow walls. So these are on a timer and it feeds them every 3 hours. And so all of these parameters into this conditioning tank mimics spring, and so they're in here for 6 to 8 weeks, and it allows their eggs and sperm to mature so that we're able to spawn them during a time of the year that they're not normally spawning. All right, now we're going to go check out the spawning area. It's right over here. This is our spawning area. This is our table where we put the broodstock that you just saw from the broodstock room. We scrub them up. We take them off feed for 48 hours to kind of clean out their system. And then we put them on this table. And this table is colored black so that we're able to see the difference between the eggs and the sperm when they come out. So after the spawning is complete, we collect the fertilized eggs by draining the table down. So we collect the eggs on a sieve just like this one. The eggs are really, really small. So we use usually like a 30 micrometer screen, which is really, really tiny. It allows the eggs to catch on the screen, but the sperm to pass through. And then we'll rinse the screen into a bucket and count the eggs. Now that we have all these fertilized eggs, we need to give them 24 hours in clean, sterile seawater to hatch out. And so then they go into these various tanks right here. So we have a couple 500-gallon tanks, and then we have 10 100-gallon tanks. And so for shellfish, the larval cycles are a little bit different. They're dependent on what species they are, but for bay scallops, usually 12 to 14 days in this larval area. And then quahogs are about 12 days, and then oysters are in between 16 to 22 based on how they're growing. But basically the care is the same, which makes it really unique about having a shellfish hatchery, because you can grow multiple species at the same time. They're eating the same algae. They require the same type of care. So the biggest part of running a shellfish hatchery is growing enough food to feed the shellfish, because they eat a lot. Shellfish are filter feeders, so they filter phytoplankton from the harbor, which is really great because they act as water cleaners and purifiers. So in the hatchery, we grow several different species of algae. Each container has a different species of algae. This is called Tetraselmis. It's a green algae, hence the green color. Each species has a different nutritional profile, which means it might be higher in starches and lipids or have better vitamins, that sort of thing. So, and they're also different sizes. So what you're looking at here is green pigmented water with, millions and millions of little tiny green algae cells swimming around. It isn't like the macroalgae that you see growing on pools or on your boat and that sort of thing. So this is microalgae. We're really lucky on Nantucket to have such a clean water source. We live 35 miles out to sea, and the awesome part about where this hatchery is it's located on Brant Point. So when the tide comes in from the jetties, we're getting that fresh, clean water coming from the ocean. So it's an ideal spot to have a hatchery. All of our water is pumped from the end of the dock. It's just about 200 feet out there. It comes in through a pump right here. We're able to program our pump based on gallons per minute, so we can pump water in really fast or slowly depending on what we're doing. All of our water goes through a sand filter right here, and then this is a 1 micron bag filter. So everything essentially is super clean coming into here. And then it's put into our water tanks over here. Once the water is put into the tanks, we recirculate that water through its own system. So we have 4 different tanks. So we're able to have 4 different tanks doing 4 different temperatures, which is nice because we can do 4 different species that might have different temperature requirements. It just makes it really versatile for our day and what we're able to do in here. So if you want to take a little closer look, we have This is our typical recirculating system. The water comes into these tanks. They're really tall. They're 1,100 gallons. We bought 4-foot diameter tanks that are really tall to preserve space. This is a historical building, so we really wanted to maximize our floor space. So we got these tall tanks. The water gets pumped in through the top, and then it recirculates through another 1-micron filter, and then it goes through heat pumps upstairs, which are programmed based on the temperature that we want the tank to be. All right, after the larval cycle, when they go through metamorphosis and they're ready to set, this is an example of a system that we use to set both bay scallops, quahogs, and oysters as well. So this is called a downweller system. Basically, you have the same screens, they're just a little bit larger in size. This one, I think, is a 500 micron screen. So they sit right here, and you put the shellfish in here, and they sit on the screen in the water. And then we have these little items called airlifts, and so they pump water and air up and go down through the screen. So they're called downwellers. And the next phase of our hatchery development on the dock in this phase 2 is we are receiving 7 new downweller tanks that we're able to use for shellfish grow out. Up until this point, we've been doing larval releases where we just raise shellfish larvae and we release them. But we're really hoping to expand our production cycle and do some more grow out so that we can have some larger shellfish to do stock enhancement with. So this is the tank room. These are the tops of the tanks that we were looking at downstairs. This is where the water comes in and recirculates through. These are called bioballs. Basically, we're just stripping any gas that might be coming in the water that could be harmful to the shellfish, and just filtering through these balls does that. So we have green lines that go into our heat exchanger room, and the yellow lines are the return lines. And so that's how we heat and cool the tanks. So if you want to head into that room, I can show you the technology there for heating and cooling the tanks quickly. All right, welcome to our heat pump room. So this is where all of the seawater from down below in our large tanks passes through. So each tank has its own separate heat pump. They just look like big air conditioning units. What's unique about these is that they both heat and cool. So we can really just come up here and set the temperature gauge to what we want. And it will trigger a valve and it will start heating or cooling. So that's really awesome. Usually these items are located outside, but since we are on a Coast Guard beach and we're historical, we have them inside. So they're not very loud. They don't put off too much heat, but they're a very efficient way to heat and cool our seawater system. So we're pretty happy with it. All of our algae cultures are maintained in a lab setting. So we have them up here in my office under a hood. So like I said before, we get all of our tubes from various institutions that specialize in growing clean cultures of algae. And it's like a restaurant. So you just order the algae based on the species that you want and that you're gonna need to feed to whatever it is that you're growing. So we have probably 8 different species up here. We have algae that swims, algae that doesn't swim. We have diatoms, just all different types of flavors of algae for the shellfish. And we keep it in here just to keep it as sterile as possible, so that if we have a problem that happens downstairs in the larger cultures, we're able to restart using these smaller clean cultures. So it's basically the same process. We use a pressure cooker though to sterilize our water instead of bleach up here. And we inoculate these smaller flasks, these 150 ml flasks from the tubes where we're growing the individual species as well. So we do this about every 3 weeks up here, and we just keep it separate from everything else just to maintain sterility. Leah Cabral. I am the assistant biologist for the town of Nantucket, Natural Resources Department. What I do here is I started the shell recycling program, Shuck It for Nantucket, and we have 30 participants between restaurants and bar bars, and they recycle their oyster or quail shell. So one of my favorite projects that I've been working on since I started the job here is looking at the phytoplankton, so the little microscopic plants that that live in the harbor and in the ponds. Sometimes these plants can create blooms, and sometimes depending on what the species is, they can be harmful and create an algal bloom, which closes down the ponds to swimming. So it's really interesting to be a part of this research, looking into the different types of algae and also looking into management techniques to control that.
I'm Jim Pearl. I'm the Natural Resources Coordinator for the town of Nantucket. I'm the Natural Resources Coordinator.
Thank you, Tara. Oh, uh-oh. There we go. All right. Great. So I think what we were hoping is that people might have some questions for Tara, and I do see, oh, okay. I got a text, but it wasn't a question. So does anyone have questions for Tara, or Tara, do you want to discuss anything further?
Yeah, so I think I told you that when we first started, we produced 5 million base scallop larvae, and now that we have a new hatchery, we consistently produce around 200 million base scallop larvae a season. Our season usually starts in April and then goes, well, until now, basically doing field work and evaluations and that sort of thing. For those of you not familiar with hatchery work, 200 million, I mean, sounds like this huge number, but when you think about the technique that we're using and releasing these larvae when they're 14 days old, you know, trying to figure out ways to evaluate that and translate that to numbers in the fishery is very difficult. As you know, base scallops swim, so they move around, and they're not always, you know, you might put them in one area and then you might find them in another area. And that's kind of where we're at right now in our season. Our commercial season starts November 1st. So we've gone out and evaluated everything that we did this summer through dive surveys. And now we're just starting to kind of uncover large amounts of seed and stuff that could be a result from our stock enhancement. And it's a matter of trying to track it down and find it, because there's a lot involved when you're doing stock enhancement with live animals that are moving and subject to tides and currents and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different than like farming shellfish, you know, in a cage and that sort of thing, doing this type of work. But we do all types of different stock enhancement, but base scallops, I would say, are a little bit more difficult.
And Tara, how do you quantify the effectiveness of what you're doing with the base scallops?
There are a lot of different steps that we take to quantify it at different stages. Base scallops are pretty unique because they only live for about 2 years. So the management on the base scallop fishery is different than you would manage, you know, other types of species. But from our stage, we know what we're putting in the water, and we know if they're competent larvae. We know where we're putting them, so we're able to kind of, we can't necessarily control the settings, but we can choose when we're going to release them and where we're going to release them and under what conditions. So you know where you're putting them. And on the 14th day, when we're doing our larval releases, the scallops have developed a foot, and so they're ready to attach to something. They're ready to settle. And so usually what they prefer to set on is an eelgrass bed, because they like to be off of the bottom and they like to attach to something to help them survive predation and just, you know, just keep them safe for the first few stages of their life. So when we put them in the water, there's not much we can do because they're like the size of a grain of sand. But we do put out what we call spat bags. So they're these, I think they're 0.75 millimeter bags that have a netron material. It's basically like a plastic netting in them. And this is a substrate that they will attach to as well. And these float on the surface in the area that we do the releases. And so there is a small percentage of scallops that will attached to this artificial substrate that we provide. But our hopes is that everything will go down onto the eelgrass bed. But what the spat bags provide for us is they give us an idea of if the scallops kind of stayed in the area. And it also allows us to know how big they are after like 6 weeks when we go back and we look in the bags to see what type of recruitment we have. And then we'll know like what size scallop we're looking for underwater. So usually it takes from the time to release after, I think about 60 days, they're about 10 to 12 millimeters. So like, a pencil eraser is the size of them. That's still too small for us to do a full survey on. We usually have to wait till they're the size of a quarter to see them underwater while we're diving. So usually towards the end of the summer is when we do our dive surveys, and we'll scout the area. And we have five different areas around the release point that we evaluate. And then also, so after we do that evaluation, we do a whole harbor survey every September. So information comes in, if the scallops have recruited or shifted outside of the area when we did a release. We have information on that we can investigate further. And then the final step is ultimately the fishermen. So the fishermen are out there pulling dredges from November to March, and sometimes they'll come across a large seed pile or a large seed population that we missed. And, they'll call us up and they'll say, hey, we found all this seed, I think it, should be thinned out, or maybe it should be moved to an area that it might have better growth potential or, spawn potential, that sort of thing. So then we get into, trying to decide if we can trace it back to something that we did, or if it was a natural spawning event and natural recruitment that went on. And so we'll try to trace it back. And then we get into seed management ultimately, because you don't want all your seed in one area of the harbor because it will get stunted. So we try to kind of spread it out and create spawning sanctuaries and that sort of thing to kind of help Mother Nature along. So there's a lot to the management of the bay scallop, once it leaves the hatchery, and that's kind of the harder part. And it's a lot of what we're working on now to develop and kind of improve each season.
This is Louis. Is the stocking that you do mainly for the public, or do you work with other private institutions?
So everything that we do as a municipality is for the public benefit. Everything that we do in form of stock enhancement, restoration, eventually will be allowed to be harvested by the public, as long as you have, the appropriate shellfish permit through the town. But yeah, there's we don't produce oyster seed and give it to private oyster farmers to grow out. That's not in the business that we're in. It's all for public benefit. And for a lot of what we're getting into now also is, raising shellfish to apply to different types of coastal resiliency projects. Like we just put in a lot of oyster castles along one of our shorelines to provide a buffer for a salt marsh that is having salt marsh dieback. And so, yeah, we're just really trying to see how we can apply shellfish to a lot of these restoration shoreline projects now around the island.
Thank you.
Anyone else have some questions?
Hi, Tara. Do you collaborate with other hatcheries or on-growing facilities that are out of state by chance?
We do. I think the hatchery world for shellfish is pretty small. So my background was in commercial shellfish hatchery stuff before I came here. So I'm pretty tied into the hatchery world. I try to go to conferences and talks, and we all do try to talk. There's a lot of private hatcheries on the Cape. So when we have problems with our algae production or a contaminant or something, we all share our cultures back and forth and ship them overnight. Everyone's pretty open. I would say the difference, we try to collaborate as much as possible, but when you're dealing with privately owned hatcheries and shellfish operations, they tend to be private. They don't want to share their technology or advancements with you, because they don't want someone else to get the upper hand on production or sales or that sort of thing. And that's why I love working for the town, because we don't care. We want to share everything that we develop or anything that we find out. But yeah, I would say everyone in general works really well together. We love working with other organizations, and we've had the opportunity to take what we do here to Africa as well. And we've worked with Woods Hole Institute in developing shellfish hatcheries over in Zanzibar, which was really awesome. So yeah, I mean, we try to collaborate as much as possible and share as much knowledge as we can.
Thank you.
Anyone else? We're also going to have another visit with Tara next month. So you can also, if you forget anything, you can save those questions for a month from now. But we've got her, so take advantage of it.
Tara, can you share any of your preliminary plans or thoughts around the seaweed farming culture?
Well, I personally don't have any plans around the seaweed culture. I think, so the people that we have involved in growing oysters right now, most of our oyster leases here are deep water leases. So they're in 25 feet or more, and they're floating culture. They use the oyster grow system. And what happens here on that site is, in the wintertime, there's a risk of ice and icing up. And so you can lose your gear, you can lose your oysters. We also have a lot of winds that blow out of the north. So the agitation of the oysters in the cold water while they're dormant can really stress them out, and you can have a lot of loss. So the practice that most of our farmers here on Nantucket do is they sink their cages on December 15th, which is kind of our cutoff. And then they raise them again on April 15th. So we have this acreage, or they have the acreage up there that they could utilize for seaweed farming in the winter as another crop. But from my discussions with the existing farmers that we have, is that that's their time off to chill and work on their gear or go on vacation or reconnect with their family. So a lot of them aren't interested in staying on the water, especially because the weather isn't that great. And yeah, it's not that enticing. However, I think that if we were to get some new applicants that came in to kind of shake things up a little bit and want to try something new, we would be all on board and supporting them and trying to make that happen. I think the infrastructure for seaweed farming can be difficult on an island. I know that the Martha's Vineyard has some, I think Cottage City Oysters is maybe doing some kelp farming. And I know that, there's some difficulties in how you handle the product and process it if you don't have a site on your island or close by. So I think there would definitely be some obstacles to overcome if that was something that people decided to get into, if they wanted to utilize it as a food product. We did have Bren Smith come through here. He works for Green Wave. He kind of developed the whole kelp farming. And he had the opinion that farming seaweed as like a fertilizer and not as a food item, you wouldn't be as subject to as many like HACCP rules and things like that. And he seemed to think that there was some cost saving in growing seaweed that way and a lot of benefits too. So there are things to think about. There isn't anyone completely gung-ho and going into seaweed over here yet, but like I said, we're open to whoever has an idea and a good business plan.
Anyone else?
Tara, I'm interested in getting into, or at least starting a career in oyster cultivation, primarily the farming and grading sector. Are there any specific skills that you look for in candidates, or what do you look for?
We look for someone that can work really hard. The thing about like farming any shellfish is that they're live animals. So you don't really get holidays and weekends off, especially if you're dealing with like the hatchery size animals because they have to eat every day and they need care. So that can be surprising to some people when they get into it. Like I probably haven't had a weekend off in 20 years. So it's just something to consider. If you love working outside and in inclement weather and things, that's, a great job for you, working on a boat. I would say any type of practical skill that you have to offer, like learn how to trailer a boat, learn how to drive a boat, learn how to fix and mend bags, learn how to use your power tools, learn PVC plumbing. A lot of those practical skills, I think, go a long way aside from what you're learning in your program and your math and your science. And attention to detail, I think, is very important, and being a methodical person and being able to follow directions, and also having like really great observational skills. Noticing how oysters are growing on a certain day, or if they stop feeding, just having those types of skills are things that we look for when we're interviewing our interns. It can really go a long way. I think you can like read about how to farm oysters in a book, but I think like if you have just those basic things, or you're open to learning them, I think that you'll be well suited for it.
Is this for you?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if you would really know, but do you know if there's a large presence of like bivalve cultivation in Florida, or what the market looks like down there?
Most of my experience with Florida is in the hard clam culture. I don't know about a lot of oyster culture, but like I said, I've been out of the South for a long time. I was raised in Georgia and went to school in Alabama. But I would say the best place to figure out what's going on is to contact some of the extension agents down there, through like University of Florida Extension Service for shellfish. And they'll be able to hook you up with any farmers or any programs that are going on.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And maybe come down and visit Tara on Nantucket.
Yeah, anytime, come on out.
This is Louis. Quick question. Do you have any plans in your roadmap to add any other species or other than shellfish?
Well, the town pays for my salary, so I don't know if I don't know. I mean, I could see us getting into perhaps raising seaweed in the future, mainly for water quality benefits. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think that we would ever get into like fish culture or anything like that. I think we could diversify a lot with our shellfish, especially in like some of these restoration projects, getting into, maybe some ribbed mussels or blue mussels. We have soft shell clams here, razor clams, doing something like that to develop more of a buffer zone, or also to, kind of increase our recreational species variety. We do like little side projects, every year. One year we did blood arcs, and we did that because we were working with Woods Hole in Africa, and we wanted to help the people over there kind of develop some hatchery techniques. So we were doing experiments in tandem so that we could have some comparables and give advice and stuff like that. So we do have room to be creative here. And it just kind of depends what the budget allows for.
Thank you.
What kind of species of oyster are you cultivating?
So what we have here on the East Coast are Crassostrea virginica. That's pretty much all we're approved to do. There are options like within that species. So Our growers are only allowed to get seed from certified hatcheries that are off island. So the Division of Marine Fisheries in Massachusetts has approved hatcheries that are safe from a pathology standpoint that you can get your seed from. And so you have a choice at that point to get either a diploid, which is your normal oyster, or a triploid oyster, which is genetically modified. And there are advantages to both, depending on what your production plan is. Some people like the triploid oysters because they are modified so that all of their energy goes into growth and not reproduction because they're sterile. Some growers like them because in the month of July and August, when all the diploid oysters are spawning and milky, some of the people that are running raw bars or eating oysters on the half shell prefer not to have that in their mouth. So yeah, there's a lot of different reasons as to why people choose what type of oyster. I think it's very site dependent, and I think it also depends on what your beliefs are as far as like what type of, if you want to grow a modified product or not.
Tara, I think Hannah might have had a question,
Okay.
unless I'm
thanks.
wrong.
Hi. Yeah, I have a few questions, but I'll just ask one. I'm from New Zealand, so we're looking at seaweed as well. And I was just wondering, because some of the cultivation methods are not well known here, what would be your advice around how to develop some of those hatchery methods for new species? Is it something that has to be done in a hatchery research facility like yours, or do you think that it's possible to learn enough, for citizen scientist type to learn enough to be able to cultivate specific seaweed for, either food or fertilizer or other products safely?
Yeah, I really don't have experience in growing seaweed up to this point. I know that Martha's Vineyard Shellfish Hatchery has experimented with growing it in their hatchery. I think a lot of this stuff happens by trial and error, and it can happen at a small school in your, just like a garage and at your home, if you have access to seawater and an aquarium bubbler. Like, I think you can really learn a lot and make things happen if you're creative and just try it. But I think also like do your research and talk to people that have tried it and some lessons learned so you can save yourself some time and money. But I mean, we do a lot of that sort of thing here where we're just like, I don't know if it's going to work. We'll just see what happens, and I think it's really important to know what doesn't work also, as well as, what could work. So it's just a matter of, if someone came to me and said, let's do sea urchins, I would probably contact everyone that I knew that knew something about sea urchins and try to figure out what they did and what worked and what didn't work, and then apply it to our systems and see what we could improve on and what would work.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hannah, do you have any more questions? Because we're going to end up wrapping it up in another 5 minutes. So you might as well, if no one else has a question.
Well, I was going to ask, I mean, not everyone has such a great network. Is it possible that there's any online, really good online kind of resources or places that you could kind of get some good information from? I mean, it seems like a lot of people who are in this space have a lot of qualifications, but for people that are kind of new to the space and stuff, it's hard to shoulder tap all your network of microbiologist friends, especially if you don't come.
Yeah, I think that there probably are like a lot of what I would probably call hobbyists, and people that are just kind of dabbling in it. I think a great place to start would be the Martha's Vineyard Shellfish Group, because when I was over there, they did have 10-gallon aquariums where they had the seaweed plugs that they were growing, and it looked very, very basic, and so it seemed like something that you could definitely start with. If I'll put my email in the chat, and so I can send some contacts and stuff that if that would be helpful for you to help kind of guide where you start.
Okay. And thanks, Jennifer. You sent the seaweed hub.org. That's great.
Right. I just put the link and I put another link to another seaweed document. There's a lot of people kind of in this larger global scale working on seaweed, of course, because it's so at the top of everyone's list to fix everything right now. But yeah, maybe, I don't think Rick Carney in Martha's Vineyard has done a lot of seaweed stuff, but maybe Tara, you could connect Hannah to the person that is working specifically on the seaweed there. That would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What I'm finding is a lot of it is in the private kind of industry. So, or, you know, and none of it's a lot of open to other people. So, yeah. Okay. Great.
Great. Anyone else? No? Well,
I just wanted
really-
to say,
Oh,
can you hear me at all?
yes.
Okay. I just wanted to say I got to run. I'm at work. I was really glad to be able to take a break. I'm really interested in the oyster angle of aquaculture, and it'd be really cool to come take a visit. I went down to visit Island Creek in Duxbury a few times to see their little operation. And I mean, the most fascinating thing is how they help filter the water and really encourage strong coastal ecosystems. So I really appreciate the lecture and the virtual field trip. People end up coming down. I mean, I'm a carpenter and you know, sort of handy. So I always thought that, oh, I like boats. Maybe I can get into doing this oyster thing, you know. So we'll go on some field trips soon. Thank you very
Sounds
much. I
great.
got to run.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Anyone else have anything? And if you do, or you think about something, we are going to see, like I said, Tara and Yvonne again in a few weeks. So. Great. Well, thank you, Tara. I really appreciate, and Yvonne. I thank everyone for their time.